What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking 5 big name injury prone players that are worth the risk for the 2022 fantasy football season. Basically, these are guys that have struggled with injuries as of late, but you should take a chance on them because the reward outweighs the risk. You can get them at a great value, and they have the potential to be league winners. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, a quick reminder, if you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear in the comments section. Do you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? Who else would you put on this list? We will do our best to answer all of those. And lastly, make sure to get yourself a copy of the 2022 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Everything you can want at a great value. Top 150 overall player rankings in standard and PPR formats. Individual player bios, tiers, projections, along with general fantasy advice. Details in the description. But with that being said, let's kick it off here. And we're going to kick it off at the running back position with a probably, chalk name. That is Christian McCaffrey. And you're going to say, how can you have Christian McCaffrey on this list in terms of him, being a guy that the reward outweighs the risk when he's ranked so high? Well, I should mention, first and foremost, this is PPR based, and this is based on Fantasy Pros, consensus rankings. But depending on where you draft, whether it's Yahoo, NFL, ESPN, McCaffrey, even in PPR formats, his ranking fluctuates. In Yahoo, you can get him, if you're going purely based off rankings, around the 5th pick, which I think is absolutely ludicrous. And I know what a lot of people are going to say, and that's these last 2 years, he has absolutely burned you. He's screwed you. He's cost you potentially a playoff run, a championship run, whatever the case might be. But you invested the first overall pick in him, and he didn't really pan out for 2 years straight. So why would you do it again? Why do you want to take that risk? Why do you want to get hurt when you can go with a Jonathan Taylor? And I've said this from the start, doing mock drafts, doing these breakdowns, giving my fantasy advice. And that's sure, Taylor is probably the safer option. But in terms of upside, McCaffrey has the higher upside, especially in PPR formats. The fact of the matter is, the best thing you can do is take recency bias out of, your fantasy football decisions. And I say this again all the time. I feel like not a lot of people, understand it. And that's when you do your projections, when you do your rankings, you have to project it as if the player plays a full season. And in those scenarios, McCaffrey is the number one guy in PPR formats. In my opinion, no questions asked. I mean, the last time he played the full season, he had a 1,000 season. And it doesn't matter who his quarterback is, Cam Newton, Sam Darnold. He continues to produce when he is on the field. These last 2 years, the little games that he got in, he was sensational in those when he was on the field. He was an RB1. He was a top 3 running back. He was everything that you drafted him to be. But again, people are worried about the injury. And it's going to be tough because in a lot of places, he might go first or second overall. And, if you can go with Jonathan Taylor, I guess that makes sense. I have him right there with Christian McCaffrey. But if Christian McCaffrey, you can get him at the 2nd spot, which, as crazy as that sounds to call it a value, I think it is, or anywhere lower, which I think there will be cases again, citing Yahoo's rankings at this point in time, I think you have to pull the trigger on McCaffrey. He is the focal point of the Carolina offense. He's basically used as a wide receiver out of that running back slot. And in my opinion, he is going to go absolutely crazy when he's on the field, as has been the case pretty much all his career. So for that reason, McCaffrey highlights this list of 5 injury-prone players that you should be taking a risk on. But let's continue on this breakdown, and we're going to scroll down a little bit and talk Saquon Barkley of the New York Giants. Another guy that these last 2 seasons has hurt you. But he is now 2 years removed from his ACL injury. and what has happened in the meantime. First and foremost, the New York Giants have improved their offensive line tremendously. And that's a big deal because it's not only going to help, Daniel Jones, it's going to help out Saquon Barkley. On top of that, Saquon Barkley, you could argue, still the best offensive weapon that the New York Giants have, and he's heavily utilized as a pass catcher, which again, in PPR formats, makes him so valuable. But right now, per these rankings, he's ranked as the running back 13, which to me is absolutely ludicrous. I'd be okay drafting him in the early second round. But oftentimes you don't even have to do that because he's available in the third round, middle of the third round, end of the third round. And if you can get a Saquon Barkley at that point in time, I think he is absolutely a slam dunk pick, potentially could be the biggest steal of the draft. Look, the Giants have invested in this offense, and regardless whether it's Daniel Jones at quarterback, Saquon Barkley is going to be featured. He is the main running back with an improved offensive line. He's a dual threat running back, and the Giants have brought in coaches, experienced guys that have been on teams with success recently. And whether Daniel Jones succeeds or not, I think Saquon Barkley is going to be okay. And for that reason, I have to, think that Barkley right now is a tremendous value. A guy that has top 5 running back upside that you get in the third round. Sure, it's early, it's in the first 3 rounds, but to me, that, kind of output, the upside, the reward factor absolutely obliterates the potential risk here with Saquon Barkley. Now, let's continue to move on, this time jumping to the wide receiver position, and we're going to scroll down here all the way to Michael Thomas of the New Orleans Saints. And Michael Thomas, it's tough. I feel like he hasn't played in what's almost been like 10 years, but he's not that far removed from having a record-setting season in terms of receptions for the New Orleans Saints. 2 years ago, sure, Andrew Brees was the quarterback under center, so I completely understand the hesitancy. People got burned by him last year. You knew he was going to be injured, but you still took a chance on him. Ultimately, he doesn't play. So now this year, it's like, well, why am I going to take a chance on him again? It's Jameis Winston. The Saints have added some guys, a la the draft and rookies, Jarvis Landry, and, Michael Thomas hasn't seen the field in a long time. He's older. And he's dealt with injuries. I get all of that. There's also no more Sean Payton, and all those things are valid. But a guy that, in my opinion, is still the top weapon for the New Orleans Saints in terms of wide receivers, with Jameis Winston. To me, this is the key. You still have a quarterback in Jameis Winston, even though he is mistake-prone and very up and down. He's not afraid to sling it. He's going to throw the football. And Michael Thomas is still the most experienced wide receiver that the Saints have. He has the best chemistry with the current quarterback on the team. He knows this coaching staff. He knows the offensive schemes. And I think he's still going to be the wide receiver 1 for the New Orleans Saints. Right now, typically he's ranked outside of the top 25 wide receivers. As you can see here, ranked wide receiver 26 in PPR formats on top of that per Fantasy Pros. So, he's probably going to be going after the 4th, 5th round in draft. Some people might be a little bit more bullish on him than others. But to me, if you're in PPR formats, Michael Thomas is still worth kicking the tires on. He's one of those middle round type of wide receivers, depending on how you have some of these other guys ranked around him, that can be a diamond in the rough. That's where you get to the point in drafts where the wide receiver position is truly so valuable because there's so much depth. Guys are, sliding for some reason or another with Michael Thomas. It's because of the injuries. It's because he's burned you the last couple of years. But again, he's 2 years removed from being the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football. I don't think he's going to be able to do that again. Don't get me wrong. But with Michael Thomas, you're getting a guy that is a proven producer. He's going to get the volume. It might not be as much as before, but I still think he has a 100 reception type of upside. And usually in PPR formats, that translates to a top 20 wide receiver, a top 15 wide receiver. So for that reason, Michael Thomas is still somebody that I would take a chance on this year. Continuing to scroll down, we've got Juju Smith-Schuster of now the Kansas City Chiefs. And this has everything to do with the landing spot. Juju goes from the Pittsburgh Steelers, where it's kind of been a mess as of late with Big Ben being on his decline, finally retiring last year. But it doesn't help that Juju has been hurt these last couple of seasons. So we've never gotten that, full season from him. Also, guys like a Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool have taken away a lot of targets. You can also throw in Najee Harris at the running back position there. But now with Juju going to the Kansas City Chiefs, first and foremost, there is no more Tyreek Hill, which is a big deal. Sure, Travis Kelce is still there, and I think he will be the main pass catcher for the Chiefs and for Patrick Mahomes again, but somebody's got to take, kind of that Tyreek Hill role. And to me, Juju Smith is the top potential candidate because you're not going to replace him with a Mako Hardman who hasn't done jack, even with Tyreek Hill there up until this point, and even when Tyreek hasn't been available. You're not going to replace him with a rookie right away. Juju Smith-Schuster is the most experienced guy. He has a proven track record. I mean, he was getting it done back in the days of Big Ben and Antonio Brown, and when Juju Smith has that opposite alpha next to him, in this case Travis Kelce, a la Antonio Brown, he can get it done, and I think he's going to get a lot of targets here. I like him in PPR formats. Right now, he's going, per these rankings, outside of the top 30 wide receivers. I think pretty much any capable wide receiver on the Kansas City Chiefs offense can be in the wide receiver, one conversation, not overall wide receiver one, but a wide receiver one. So top 12, top 15, top 20 for sure. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on Juju Smith here because he's not Tyreek Hill and because he's kind of hurt you these last two seasons. But he's in a great situation and kind of in a situation that duplicates the success he's had before when he's been in that wide receiver one conversation. So for that reason, Juju Smith-Schuster, again, is somebody that I would absolutely be taking a chance on this year. And then finally, let's round it out at the tight end position with one Rob Gronkowski. Now here, I do have to put an asterisk there. This is probably the biggest stretch out of them all because technically Gronk hasn't said, I'm going to play this year. But, if he does, it's a big if, I do want to say that, Rob Gronkowski is in a great position to succeed. First and foremost, obviously, he has that connection with Tom Brady. Last year, when he was healthy, he was a top 5 tight end. He was a tight end 1. But again, Gronk, he's got the injury history. He's retired before. So there are those issues. But right now, when you can get him potentially as a guy outside the top 20 tight ends because he hasn't committed to playing, and he's essentially going to cost you nothing right now. But the upside, especially with Chris Godwin, to me here is the X factor. Chris Godwin, potentially missing a decent chunk of the season because he's rehabbing his ACL injury. I think a lot of people are focusing in on Mike Evans, which absolutely that should be the case. But some people are forgetting Rob Gronkowski. So if he does return, he does play, I think he can absolutely duplicate the type of stats that he had last season because after Mike Evans, Rob Gronkowski is the next guy for Tom Brady. Sure, they brought in Russell Gage, but I still think Rob Gronkowski, a bigger, more physical guy, has higher touchdown upside, has better chemistry with Tom Brady. I'd take a chance on him and a guy that you can get outside the top 20 tight ends, even outside the top 15 tight ends, because there's going to be some people that are higher on him and are willing to also take the risk, but you can get him in double-digit rounds while he does have top 10, top 5 fantasy upside at the tight end position. To me, that's an absolute steal. Tight end position is always one that's tough. It's tough to predict, but if Gronk plays this season, you're going to see his ADP absolutely skyrocket. And in my opinion, that makes him a guy that, maybe you kick on the tires right now a little bit earlier And since it's not going to cost you all that much, again, you see him, he's outside the top 150 overall player rankings here per Fantasy Pros, makes him a great guy where the reward outweighs the risk. But with that, we wrap up this breakdown of our 5 big name injury prone players that you should be targeting for this 2022 fantasy football season. As always, let us hear it in the comment section. Did you agree, disagree? Who else would you put on this list, along with any other questions you guys might have? We will do our best to answer them all. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, and again, make sure to get yourself a copy of the 2022 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Details in the description. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.